welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, tonight we are discussing power.
Power and its ability to corrupt.
Yes. And that is the question. There's a what's become an aphorism was something written by Lord Acton, a 19th century English
Baron Acton.
Baron Acton, Lord Acton, member of the House of Lords, and he wrote that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. So,
Well, that
power,
certainly has become an aphorism.
it has.
You know
Does
what else, you know what else corrupts?
what?
Strong drink.
Does it?
I've heard this.
Well, I'm for it. And
Well,
what are
I
you
believe
what are you corrupting yourself with tonight?
I am corrupting myself with a dark way, the Kraken, the black spiced rum, and a bit of Fever Tree ginger beer,
Nice,
and
nice.
a little bit of lemon bitters.
Oh, that sounds good.
It's very good. And you, sir?
I have in my
Oh, and even harder to see wine than usual.
yes, yes. This is a Vinho Verde from Espanol. It's a Portuguese white wine, frizzante, slightly effervescent, not a full sparkling wine, but very nice, light, and refreshing.
Sounds like that would be delightful on a summer evening.
Absolutely, it is. They also make a very lovely rosé too.
Very good. Well,
Thank you.
cheers. All right.
Yes,
So, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
yes. Do is that always true? Are there examples of, and first of all, what does power mean? And Acton meant essentially political power.
Yeah.
And right. So does a position of political power always lead to corruption?
Well, and I think there's another question I think in here is, have we, because we can look at historical
What is
examples.
corruption too would mean it would be the question. What is corruption?
What is, well, and have we ever seen a historical example of absolute power? Is there such a thing as absolute power? Even Caesar got stabbed.
um I that's an excellent question. um I think if we were looking at absolute power, we'd look at probably monarchs of the
Monarchs, dictators,
ancient world, medieval world,
emperors.
dictators, certainly even of the modern and recent past, modern world and recent past, as absolute power. The off with their heads
Yeah,
from Queen from Alice in Wonderland.
sure.
So I think that's a question. I think that Acton was viewing any infringement on liberty as he saw it, or his liberty, as a corrupt exercise of power. I think it's revealing that Acton, like most 19th century English Catholics, supported the Confederacy because he saw Lincoln as as a radical and a dictator who was exercising power and limiting the liberty of the states' rights. and he lamented the surrender of the Confederacy, because he saw that as an infringement on liberty. So
Well,
what Acton's view, what Acton's view of power and corruption and liberty are by 19th century standards of a man in his place, in his elevated place and wealth at that time. But as it's become an aphorism, people don't think about what the origin of the phrase was.
right.
In time. Now people think, well, what is absolute power? And people bandy about accusations of tyranny and dictatorship all the fucking time.
Oh, sure.
Right.
I was thinking about this the other day. Well, before I get to my thoughts, I'll quote someone wiser, Lincoln, in fact, as we spoke of him. He said, "Nearly all men can stand adversity. If you want to test a man's character, give him power." Abraham Lincoln. That's another very famous quote.
And that actually leads me to the primary contrary point of view, which was expressed by Robert Caro, the brilliant biographer of Robert Moses, the excuse me, the essentially designer of the modern New York City and of Lyndon Johnson. A brilliant author, extensive historical research, but assembled into absolutely very readable, engaging story. So much so that
An odd sort of diversity of subject there, really, to me.
well, his theme through both of those works was power, because Robert Moses simply made it happen. He had the authority, and he simply, tore down things and built things and designed things to make his vision of what New York would be.
Is he considered responsible for a lot of the sort of racist things that
Yes. Yeah.
the low bridges for the buses and so on, that
Yes.
kind of stuff?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That was part of his thing as well. But in what Caro wrote was that um, power doesn't always corrupt. And when he was writing about Lyndon Johnson, power doesn't always corrupt. Power always reveals. When you have enough power to do what you always wanted to do, then you see what the guy always wanted to do. When we claim that power corrupts, we let powerful people off the hook. How you use your authority reveals your character. Selfish leaders hoard power for personal gain. Servant leaders share power for social good. And the ultimate test of character for people in power is how they treat people who lack it.
Right. Sure. Well, there's a more homey, another homily that I've heard is that if someone that treats you nice but isn't nice to the waitress isn't a nice person.
Right.
And there it is, that that they perceive power over someone and therefore exercise their baser instincts or whatever.
And I know we've both seen people who play up to people they perceive as being able to give them something, or they can get something
advance
from
them somehow.
Right. But aren't nice to people who they don't think can give them anything or benefit them in any way. And I think that I agree more with Caro that
Yes.
it power reveals. Does someone does someone treat people the waitress? It's back to the thing we talked about before, the 2 beers and a puppy.
Yeah, right. Well, there's also the concept for me, well, money is power. We've heard that also. And I had this conversation with somebody one time, and for me, I never thought of money as power, but money is liberty.
Yeah, I remember something you said once about, and I think this is where you're going, about what when you have money, what were problems can become inconveniences.
Well, that and that if you have enough money, no one can make you do anything you don't want to do if you have enough money.
Yeah, it's called fuck you money, right?
Right. There's and that the more money you have, the more people you can say fuck you to.
Yeah.
And there's an upper limit, I suspect, but uh, I think that money, as it leads to power, and like you were saying, reveals is that it it chips away at inhibition,
Because
right? That I can do this now. I could never do this before. I'm going to do it. Why shouldn't I do it? And I think at first there may be a why shouldn't I? It doesn't hurt anyone. And eventually that it doesn't hurt anyone stops mattering.
well, and that's Dorian Gray,
Right.
the picture of Dorian Gray. That was his for him, it wasn't money. It was he had money, but it was
Right.
there were no consequences for his physical depravity.
I
Um,
heard some, I heard, God help me quote Andrew Tate.
oh,
I know, I know. He's like, he's the poster child for toxic masculinity for a lot of people.
he's currently under in custody and under arrest, charged with human trafficking and trafficking of minors and all sorts of horrendous.
Right.
He
And
fled to Romania to escape consequences for what he did, and they arrested him. So,
yeah, right. So and the quote doesn't redeem him at all, but he's what he pointed out is that when you're rich, everything is free, or it feels free, because if you've got $100 million and you want a $2 million car, okay, you still got $98 million. It doesn't having the car doesn't that having that money or not having that money makes no difference in
right.
your lifestyle at a certain point.
I think I would take it even further is that wealthy people and famous people get all kinds of perks
Right.
that most people don't
And
have.
they become expectations.
Yes. And they also, yeah, so that's where you get the don't you know who I am kind of attitude that people express. Yeah, I know who you are and I don't fucking care. You got to wait in turn, wait your line, wait your turn just like everybody else.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah. No, sorry, Judge, you're getting a ticket after all.
yeah.
That kind of attitude. Sure. But it certainly, and this goes back to the other thing we were talking about at another episode about celebrity culture.
Yes.
For some reason, people want to give celebrities a pass on bad behavior, or a sports figure a pass because, well, they mean so much to so many people. Well, they
And
shouldn't mean that much.
something that you and I have both said is that the greater your renown, the greater your recognition, the greater your position and privilege, the greater your responsibility to not be a dick.
Well, if you have any
So,
investment or respect for the institution that that has given you that renown,
yeah.
I think is the difference.
And that's why I think that I say power is a temptation, but how people react to the temptation of power reveals who they are.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's fair enough.
so yeah, so it doesn't automatically corrupt, but it's good to have structural limitations on power, on the accumulation of power,
Oh,
because there are people for whom it will will corrupt them. We've seen what happens when somebody who was already an asshole gets elected to high office, like, oh, the presidency, and says, I can do whatever I want.
Right.
If the
Right.
president does it, that means it's not a crime. That's what Nixon said.
Yeah.
It's not illegal. Well, no, that's not how things work. You don't have that absolute power. But yet that's been emulated by other people, the people during the second Bush administration who advocated for the unitary executive theory, meaning
Yeah.
that all power in the government rests with the presidency. Absolutely antithetical to
That,
the
yeah.
Constitution.
That is a dictatorship.
Yeah.
That is exactly what we're talking about. That is authoritarianism laid bare. That is all it is.
Yeah. And there are people who support that because they think they're going to get something out of it. They think they're going to profit by it. They think they're going to get policies enacted that they want.
Well, it's
Against, yeah,
because these authoritarians tell them that's what will happen.
yes,
You will be restored. And I was thinking about this the other day, that every authoritarian, every would-be dictator comes to power by promising to restore the place of some group of people, that they proclaim themselves liberators of an oppressed, or a mythically oppressed people, and that they are going to deliver them and return them to the place of privilege that they deserve. If only you'll follow me, you will regain that, whatever it was that you feel like you're being deprived of.
yep,
Every authoritarian, every dictator throughout history has done that. So anybody who says that to me publicly is suspect.
yes. Oh, yeah, that's the playbook
Yeah.
for those. That's the playbook for people who are already corrupt. They're already corrupt for some definition of corrupt. That is, they have, and there's so many different ways to define corruption, other than including the taking bribes, but
Oh,
other
yeah.
than that, having, again, being accruing power for yourself, not being a servant, kind of, how do you call it, a servant leader, but being a selfish leader, a selfish leader, and that's it's a selfish person who becomes a leader who is corrupted by that position of power. It is a servant leader somebody who's a servant who becomes a leader who can remain a servant, is not corrupted by the power. They're used the position of power to give more power to everybody else to share,
Right.
and for the benefit of everybody. So corruption can include bribes, but mostly corruption is about accruing the benefits to yourself and hoarding the benefits to yourself rather than unselfishly sharing them.
And I don't know if I don't know if I could call this uniquely American, but there's certainly a thread of it in our politics and our history, that there's this sort of circular argument that, and it ties in with religion, the prosperity gospel, that, well, I have money because I deserve it. Clearly, I wouldn't have this money if I didn't deserve to have it. So anything I do to get money is okay, because having money means I deserve to have money. And
Yeah, yeah. And if you give me your money,
yeah,
then
I will restore you to the place of prosperity, right?
exactly. Well, the whole prosperity gospel is such a fraud.
Well,
It's
yeah.
such that, and the and I've said this before, people, I absolutely support people's right to believe whatever they choose to believe. That
Right.
doesn't mean that I agree with what they choose to believe. It means they have the right to believe it. People believe all kinds of nonsense, and they have the
Right.
right to believe it. Um, what I don't support is when they try to push those beliefs on other people.
Right.
And
Well, that's
yeah,
supposedly what our country's sort of bounded on. First Amendment. No.
uh,
Yeah.
Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion.
Right.
Right.
Is it the
Uh,
First Amendment?
yeah, First Amendment, that one, and free speech
Yeah.
uh, are both in the First Amendment. And the people who who claim that the country was founded as a Christian country are either deluded or lying,
Right. Yeah.
because it serves them to do so. And I I despair sometimes at how how just as I think I'd mentioned before, it astounds me some of the incredibly poor quality movies that are made in volumes. There are tons of them. You look on any streaming service, you can find all sorts of really crappy movies.
Hmm.
It What astounds me is similarly, but is even worse, is the number of incredibly inept, unqualified people elected to the United States Congress
Oh, well,
who
yeah.
were corrupt to begin with, and play the same playbook. Vote for me because I hate the same people you hate, essentially.
Well, it used to be, I mean, before these sort of culture wars erupted, um, and and I think quite frankly, you were the playbook was to white Christian people in general, right? So that was a given. You didn't have to talk about that. What you talked about then was how I'm going to cut your taxes. I mean, the car in every garage, the chicken in every pot. I'm going to make the everyone prosperous,
Mm-hmm.
or at least not impoverished. I'm going to fix your pocketbook if you elect me.
There's a Yes, there's a difference though between the advocates of the bottom up, middle out, raise people to the middle class, grow the middle class, or the people who claim to be doing, I will cut your taxes, and then they don't cut
Right.
their
Yeah.
taxes. They cut the taxes of the wealthy donors, the
Right.
1%, 1/10 of 1%. Some of these same corrupt uh, politicians complaining about the deficit, who were absolutely silent when the previous administration increased the deficit by
Oh yeah.
20, the debt, national debt, excuse me, not the debt, the debt. 25% of the national debt was accrued during the previous administration.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
25%. And they said nothing. And who did and when they're talking about, well, we have to decrease the debt, we have to decrease the deficit. Okay, repeal the tax cuts to
Right. They, yeah,
the corrupt tax cuts, benefits that all went to the upper end. Repeal that, claw back some of that money, and that'll be a good start. But
right, because
yeah,
the current administration is reducing costs
yeah,
already, but they can't make up for the revenue that's also being lost by the previous tax law. So we could go on about that for another hour. So
yes, we could. But
um,
I think that the summary, I think, and that I think we're in agreement that power has the potential to corrupt if the person who accrues power is already a corrupt individual, a selfish individual who will use power to accrue it for themselves.
I think,
But it more
yes.
reveals who somebody is.
Well, yes, and I think that Acton makes a point in that someone who is, I mean, you look at somebody who wins $200 million in a lottery.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was saying before, they may not, they don't use that immediately to start accruing power, but they often become dissolute with that kind of money because because their inhibitions are now gone. They
Right.
don't have to worry about money. They don't have to save anything or be responsible. And that builds on itself. That irresponsibility leads them to poverty. They get into debt that they can't handle. Even with all this, you can pay cash for everything, but why pay cash? Because I've got all this cash. I can accrue debt with this cash as a principal, and that's what happens with a lot of them.
Yeah.
So
Fortunately, you and I could win the lottery and be absolutely unchanged because our values are so strong.
no, quite to be quite honest, I'd look forward to jettisoning a couple of inhibitions myself, but the few that I have left anyway.
One of the we both have been fans of comic books and superheroes.
Sure.
And when you look at Batman, Iron Man,
Reed Richards.
Arrow, billionaires who devote their wealth to fighting crime and corruption. Instead of, they're not, oh, I'm going to
Well, that's what the antithesis of that is Lex Luthor, right?
right. He's going to use his right. So I think in the comics he's elected president.
Yeah, he has been. I've always found it interesting that Superman is a poor, not poor, but farm boy of
Yeah.
average to meager, you know, what's the word I want? He didn't grow up rich. He grew up on a
Strong.
farm,
Yeah.
has untold power,
Yeah.
nearly limitless power, and he uses it to be a good guy.
Yeah.
Lex
Okay.
Luthor,
Yeah.
born into wealth, amazingly well educated, intelligent, all those things, and he uses it to accrue power.
Yeah.
And
That's why they're the antithesis of each other,
right,
and
but in the same universe, Batman and Lex Luthor probably move in the same circles. Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor know each other.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, they probably would. Well, Oliver Queen too.
Yeah, but
Um,
Oliver Queen was Oliver Queen was always more what Bruce Wayne was supposed to be, the sort of hands-off, major shareholder, but not running his companies. And he has since given them up
right.
in the comics. But
Um, but I think that's one of the reasons that Superman is as admired a character as he is, because that's the who he is. It only his power only amplified his character.
yeah, true. And but we've talked about this before too, and I found it one of the most mind-blowing observations in comics with Batman and Superman having this conversation. It's a very famous comic for this reason, is that Superman at some point looks at Batman and says, "Why do you have to be so mean?" I mean, that's essentially what he asks him.
Yeah.
And Batman tells him, "Well, because I can't fly and bullets don't bounce off of me."
Yeah.
And the flip, basically he's saying, I have to terrify my foes. It makes up some of the disadvantages that I'm dealing with.
And in fact, that's why he chose a bat.
Right.
Simple.
Yeah. superstitious and cowardly lot that criminals are.
Yeah,
But
a quotation from the.
yeah, but the flip side of that same coin is Superman, and I don't remember who pointed this out. This was another, not in the same comic book, another author or something pointed out that Superman has to be the very, very best person ever, or we would have to destroy him.
Yeah, people would be terrified of him.
And rightly so.
Yeah.
And that's kind of Lex Luthor's thing, right? Yeah. This slightly redeeming thing about Lex Luthor is that he's terrified of some creature with that much power.
Yeah. I think Luthor's portrayed as terrified, but I think he's jealous.
Oh yeah.
I think it's jealous. Really. So I think we've about covered this.
I think so. It's hard to go on for too long since we both pretty much agree.
Yeah. Well, and there you go. Yep.
And if you out there watching don't agree, please let us know.
Yeah, please. If you have thoughts to share on this subject, please let us know. And other topics you'd like to hear us talk about, please also let us know.
Yeah, like, share, do all those things. And we will see you next time on the Everyday Night. And until that time, be thou
a good night
and true.